Okay, we're back, and this time I want to talk about revolutions in Latin America. So, what we're seeing here is the beginnings of a set of ideas, which, once these ideas have been unleashed, they are very much sort of generating their own momentum, right? This idea of democracy, equality, inalienable rights of man. Will eventually spread to a broader and broader group of people. As we spoke about in the first little lecture snippet, it's certainly not the intention of the framers of the United States Constitution for the rights that they speak of as universal to be applied to the entirety of humanity. When they're speaking about all men being created equal, they are talking about male, white, largely Christian men. But over time, this language is irrevocable. It's not really very equivocal, right? When you say all men being created equal, you open yourself up to accusations of inequality, and that is what happens with this language of constitutionality and liberty. And this liberty eventually is spread to people. And we begin to see that spread in South America. So in South America, we have these empires built by the Spanish crown, very strongly rooted in very strictly organized racial hierarchies. And rebellion against these hierarchies, along with rebellion on grounds of religion, tax, and gender, is what begins to undermine this absolute monarchy and to begin to create revolutionary democracies with constitutions in South America, just like we saw in North America. So in Spain, Napoleon places his brother, right? Napoleon, Emperor of France, conquers Spain and places his brother Joseph on the throne. This upsets some of the people in the Spanish colonies, right, in New Spain. The Creoles, Creoles are people of mixed race who have been born in the colonies. They support this new monarch. However, the Peninsulares, those are the people who are from the peninsula, they're the people who came directly from Spain, who see themselves as an elite. They do not, because they're nobles themselves, and they feel that placing Napoleon's brother on the throne undermines their nobility because it's shortcutting the inheritance that should have gone, or the way the throne should have been inherited. And so we see a division between these two groups, a division between the peninsular elites and the people of mixed race. So we can see this religious hierarchy here, or racial hierarchy, sorry, where we can see people literally outlined, right? The child outlined based on the race of their parents. So un mulatto is a Spanish person with a Spanish man with a black woman, right? We can see these different racial mixings are given a very clear hierarchy. And there are dozens of categories. As you can see, it's not sort of black, white, and mixed race, but there are dozens of categories within this hierarchy. So race was an obsession of this empire. We see from 1813 to 1815 this priest called Father Morales leading a revolt, which is by some people of mixed race, but not by some of the colonial people who are whiter than them supported. And we see these sort of racial dividing lines beginning to harden. By 1820, Spain has got rid of this monarch and is briefly experimenting with a liberal constitution. And what we see here is the criollos and the peninsular elites joining up against Spain now. They revolt against Spanish rule. They don't like this liberal constitution because this liberal constitution undermines a lot of the privileges that they have and the privilege that they rely on in terms of race and status to keep the colony in their hands. They therefore declare independence, appoint a king, and the king within a year is overthrown, and a republic is declared based on these same ideas. And this begins this cycle of revolution in Latin America. in Caracas, Creole revolutionaries form a republican government, but they don't have as much support from the agricultural elites in the interior, llaneros. And this is where this guy called Simon Bolivar comes in. Simon Bolivar creates a universal sense of Americanness. There are other groups, San Martin in Argentina, for instance, and he's trying to foment this sense of unity, much like the United States did. If you look at the Articles of Confederation in the United States, there's not really a sense of them being anything more than a few independent colonies that have a shared government, but they don't see themselves as one nation. They don't see themselves as one group bound together through time. And the descent into nations in South America, once they've rebelled against Spain, is rapid. And what Bolivar is trying to do is to create some unity. So he participates in the foundation of one of the first independent nations, which is it's Colombia, but it's not the Colombia you know today. It contains Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador. And he's president from 1819 to 1830. He admires the general principles of the United States and French revolutions, but he differs on important matters. He is staunchly anti-slavery, which is very different from the United States. And secondly, he doesn't think that the US system can work in Latin America. He felt that the United States has been established in this special place where people were ready to receive the ideas of democracy, whereas Spanish America, he said, had been subject to this triple yoke of ignorance, tyranny, and vice. So it's not quite as ready for these ideas. Now, as many of you, this guy no longer with us, Hugo Chavez, draws or like to draw heavily on the legacy of Bolivar, right? The Venezuelan currency is called the Bolivar. Venezuela's official name is the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And Bolivar is this figurehead for a lot of former Spanish America, of kind of a founding father, of a figure who helped liberate them from colonialism and set them on the path to more equal constitutions. Brazil is a little different. Brazil was colonized by Portugal and not Spain. And so in Brazil we have a slightly different system. The Portuguese king comes over to Brazil to take up residence. And this causes some sort of upset, and Creoles in Portugal form a party to lobby for independence from the mainland. And they convince the Prince of Portugal to make Brazil his own monarchy. So there's an independence revolution, but it takes the hierarchy from the old country and imports it to the new country, which is relatively unusual. So what we see here is the emerging of the concept of nation. Nation is a really challenging concept to grasp. We spoke about it in a discussion the first week, but nations are essentially imagined communities, right? They're groups that see themselves tied together through space and time. And we see in South America for the first time, with people like Bolivar, the building of nations, right? The creation of a group of people who were divided by race, who were divided by religion, who were divided by class. And he says, no, you guys all have equal rights as members of this nation now. And people begin to imagine themselves not as mestizos or criollos or Catholics or slaves or freedmen, but as Colombian, right? As citizens of a nation rather than as members of a race. And this helps to undermine this thing which has been true for centuries before this, which is that your life is largely determined by where and to whom you are born. And this really opens the door for modern politics, right? This idea of liberty, freedom, equality of opportunity only flourishes in a world where you are a member first and foremost of a nation and a human being with inalienable rights, rather than somebody whose rights and future is determined by where they're born and to whom they're born. So this idea of nation and nationalism is very important in establishing modern politics as we see it today. For those of you wondering about Shays' Rebellion from the first class, I have added a Shays Rebellion. I've added a Shays Rebellion video to this part of the lecture. You'll be able to see it when you reload this. Okay, I'm going to end this one here, and then we're going to talk about the third lecture for this week.